Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm good. What is that one thing that you want to talk about?
What is the one thing that you did early in the morning? I was going to ask you. What is the one thing you want to do today?
The very fact that I'm sitting here is a great
Mm.
thing. Let's talk.
Yeah. Also, this has also become the one thing that we start off our day with, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's no, there are few things, and is it so many things actually that we? So there is one thing that I do which for mental agility right now, which is do solving the Wordle, for example, right, which we do every day.
Mm.
I think. Uh, uh, so the one thing concept, when did you come across it for the first time?
A couple of
Now
days
or huh?
back. A
Huh?
couple of days back.
A couple of days back. I came across it when there's a guy who's written a book called The One Thing,
Mhm.
and he says focus on the one thing. And a lot of times people get distracted uh, when you're setting goals, when you're moving towards something. When you have multiple targets, then what happens is you don't be very effective. And this is very relevant when, for example, people are job hunting.
Mhm.
In job hunting, a lot of times what happens is they are applying to so many different companies, so they don't have any clear strategy that is built.
Yeah.
And imagine if you're focused on just one company and you had to pick one company and you had to focus all your energies on that one.
Yeah. But if that company doesn't have a position,
And so that's how you pick the one.
okay.
Now, if the company doesn't have the position, if you're so damn good, you will create the position.
Mm. I've heard stories like that.
Yeah. You heard the story of this lady who got into Airbnb?
Uh, I'm not sure. Yeah, you can tell me.
It's a story where she went on social media, and what she did was she had applied and she didn't get any response or anything. So she
Mm.
started building a website that completely analyzed Airbnb's strategy in the Middle East.
Okay.
And then she put it online. Why in the Middle East Airbnb is not doing well, what it could do better, how she will help make it do better, because she came from the region. She was from Dubai, I think. And then
Mhm.
she actually went on doing a deep analysis on where Airbnb was struggling in this market. The CEO called her up, and that went viral. That whole thing, because it was designed like an Airbnb site itself. I think it's still there. I think I'm not sure. Seen it, pictures of it. The CEO himself called her and hired her.
Mm.
Yeah, because she was able to make viral content, and she was someone who was actually uh, thinking from the company perspective. She was not concerned more about her job when you see it like that, right?
Yeah.
So every hirer or every recruiter, what they're always looking is how can this person bring value? And if the person has already demonstrated value,
Mm.
then I've
So the
heard so
one,
many. Yeah, go on.
so the one thing, you're talking about the one thing,
Hmm.
whether it is job hunting or not.
So when it is for, so the one thing they have for retreats, the one thing retreats where you set goals for yourself. Last week I was having a conversation with my client coaching, and we are talking about this is as a spin-off from our own conversation, where how do you eat food? You
How do you
know,
eat food?
huh? Yeah, how do you eat is, I think it's showing up more and more, but probably there are certain people who would do one thing very um, mindfully, and the other things they wouldn't be so mindful about it. And but mostly the things that you're mindful about means you're more uh, focused on improving it, focused on doing it better. And if we were to pick our jobs, because we want to be better at it, we would always be mindful.
So does it mean that the one thing that you need to pick is the one thing that you're good at?
Or the one thing you want to be better at. Not that you're already good at, that you really want to get better at. And it's
Hmm.
not about it's about asking probably at each moment, what is it that I want to be mindful about? What is it that I'm really focused on at this point over here?
I have seen this happening. Yeah, I do one small thing, often. That's what I used to say when we have to build a habit. Do it in a very small way, and do it one, if possible, one or two maybe.
Hmm.
So one thing that I tried doing was to record that I have walked at the start
Okay.
of the walk itself, because that kind of removes the burden of completing the walk. You know,
Hmm.
the steps that you need to cover, and the distance that you need to walk, or the time that you need to spend. Um, but at the same time, there's another thing that I've been trying these days, because I kind of thought that I was a multitasker, but as the time goes, I've
Hmm.
become I've become constrained by too many tasks around me.
Hmm.
So what I do is I kind of remove everything, all the tasks, in front of me, and then pick that one thing that I can do. Not necessarily, not necessarily the one thing that is most important, because I need the sense of achievement, the sense of
Yes.
completion.
Yes.
And to make that happen, I take the one thing that I can do within that, time frame or frame of mind. Does it does it run with that concept of one thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what the one thing concept is about. Uh, People feel multitasking is a skill. Multitasking is something which is great, but multitasking is something that robs you of your energy to really focus. It robs you of your energy to really dive deep into it at a more mindful manner. So for example, you're at the gym and you're listening to music and you're doing the workout. You're doing multitasking over there. Now the challenge over here is, you can do both. It's not going to take away much, right?
Mm.
Where people will really struggle with multitasking is when both activities are cognitive related, meaning it needs your complete attention. Then you cannot cook and write a novel at the same time, for example, right?
Mm.
So there you cannot do multitasking. But at the same time, if you're doing something, one is active and one is passive, then you can do multitasking. But when you're doing that, what you're doing is probably, again, if you're listening to the music, if you're keeping the music in the background, it's a different thing. But if you're listening to the lyrics and then doing it, then it's a different thing. There are music which allows you to focus, binaural music, etc. That's a different one. But if you don't have that, and if you're really in the element of focusing on what you're doing, for example, if you're at the gym and if you're doing it, and if you want to build your biceps, and if you put your focus on your workout, on the area, what they say is your impact or effect is more faster and you get more results. And you can actually sense and be connected with your body more. A lot of times people are not even connected with their bodies, in the sense, their mind is not really aware of things that are happening in their body. So that is one thing. Another one thing is just about being really in it, where you think about all the possible different ways of improving whatever you're doing.
Hmm. But one thing that I one thing that I realize is that the multitasking is often these days is demanded by external environment, not in terms of doing things concurrently, but doing things within a day or within an hour. You know, within a working day, working hours. Um, the problem with that creates is that you are actually spending time on one thing, but for a short time.
Yeah.
Okay, and that kind of that creates that becomes a distraction. You're not doing one thing for a day, so you're doing like 8 things in a day. Um, I have a very interesting example. I used to listen to a lot of podcasts, especially when I drive to, work and back. And I picked up a habit of listening an audible book. Now the book is not finishing because it's like 16 hours. So it takes maybe like 8 or 10 days of my drive to finish it. That has created such a backlog of podcast. So I was thinking, which is better, listening to the book or listening to the podcast? And so it becomes a trade-off, when you pick that one thing and you're actually giving up many things. And that's a very interesting thing that you need to work on, because even when you get assignments, or work in the office or school or wherever you are, or maybe demanded by your family and friends around you, at the end you end up picking something that really characterizes you, right?
So you don't pick something that characterizes you. Your picking is characterizing you,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, I
How
mean
you
that's
pick is
what
characterizing you. You are creating the choice. The choice is with you, and then what you do or how you do it. For example, let's take the example of podcast that you said right now. You could listen to it in a car,
Mhm.
but if it was the one thing that you were doing, which you knew absolutely was so very 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 important to you because of whatever constraints or whatever reasons that you put for yourself, how would you do it better? What would you do different if it was the one thing? Obviously you would sit in a quiet calm place where there are no distractions. You would have a notepad, you would take down notes, you'd you'd reflect on the conversation after it is finished. You'd summarize for yourself how that conversation was or what the podcast was about. That is
Mm.
going deep into that one thing, right? You're going deep into that one thing and you're making it more valuable for you versus you listening passively. And when you're listening to it, so when I listen to podcasts, what I'm doing is I'm trying to connect the dots for myself in my story. I'm not so focused on the podcast itself. I'm seeing how these, like you said, I have the explorer mind and I'm exploring and I'm just exploring how this makes sense in another world. I'm seeing
Mm.
more and more patterns of that where I'm watching a movie or I'm seeing something. I'm always trying to connect in the dots and see how this relates to something else with a client story or with my story or with my journey or with something that I'm focused on or learning at that point of time. And I'm then trying to make meaning or sense out of what I'm seeing or listening to at that point
Yeah.
versus consuming it from the author's perspective, or trying to get deep into the new way of looking at things rather than reconnecting the dots in the old way. We'll always have the baggage of the old ways. So that is just one. So one thing is, like you said, your so many things are put on your plate and you will have to do so many things by the end of the day, correct?
Yeah.
The one thing philosophy I believe is for us to make a choice of which areas do we want to really focus and develop on.
Mhm.
you know that could be one thought process that we can have. The one thing is a very flexible tool. Actually, it's a very flexible tool where you can design and make it work for you in any way that you desire. uh, but the whole idea is, what the one thing is doing is what meditation has been doing, what Vipassana or any of those people. Meditation is about focus on the one thing, focus on your breath, focus on your breath, nothing else, remove everything, eliminate everything, focus on the
Mm.
breath. Your mind will wander, bring it back to the breath, bring your focus back to the breath, right? So
Mm.
that is where it comes from for me. How you do one thing is how you do everything. How And when you are able to train your mind to bring it back to the breath continuously,
Mm.
constantly, that muscle, you will be able to take it and apply it in other areas of life.
Okay. Give me another example. Forget about breathing.
Okay. So, uh, if you're not able to focus from a meditation perspective, you're saying?
No, maybe
From
from
a meditation
another avenue.
perspective, you also say, focus on a dot, focus on a leaf.
No, not meditation. What about because for that you need to again create space and do that one thing, right? Is there something from our everyday life?
So it's a muscle that you have to exercise. And again, like I said, if you're not able to do it for that one thing, then it's a muscle where you have to practice. Whether it is your walking can be meditation. You focused only on the walking. So if you practice focusing your mind on one thing, that is meditation.
Mm.
That is meditation. You don't have to sit in a space and not move. That is not meditation. Meditation is when you're able to focus on just one thing, and your mind will wander, your mind will be distracted, your mind will be doing multiple things.
Mm.
So as long as you're able to bring complete attention and focus to just one thing and not allow it to wander, and it will wander. Like when you're having this conversation right now, when we are having an and speaking, your mind is wandering, your mind is thinking about other things, your mind is, I can't sit into meditation, I've tried it so many times, I can't sit, my mind will wander, so give me something else, right? And that's a thought that you're having, that is your mind wandering from the conversation, where you will lose out on what I'm saying. The only way, for example, if you're listening to something and if you want to stay completely present without losing on what is being delivered, is to take notes, for example. And when you're listening to something and you're taking down notes, what you're doing is you're creating space in your mind. I always say this, your mind is not a place to hold ideas, it's a place to have ideas, right? So if you want to have ideas, then what you have to do is you have to have another place to hold ideas, and that's where the paper and pen comes in.
Okay, that's
So
a good.
you hold your ideas on paper, you have your ideas in your mind, so constantly you just keep downloading on the paper, because you can come back to it, so you don't have to keep it there and you don't have to juggle with the thoughts and ideas over there. So what you do is you download it on paper, and then you keep creating space for getting your information, processing it. Yeah, so that's one way. So my idea of meditation again is anything where you're bringing complete focus and you get into the zone, right? Being in the flow, being in the zone, uh, those are all, you go into a trance state where nothing distracts you. When you're doing coding, for example, you can see at certain point of times you're so much in the zone that someone calls you, someone does something, you don't realize anything, everything is blanked out.
Yeah. The challenge is to get into that zone, frequently.
Yeah.
So it comes. Yeah, it does. It does happen when you are in the zone. What I realize is that you are like probably 10 times more productive.
Yes.
The challenge is to stay there, longer and uh, more frequent.
So I'll give you an example from your own life, what you do already. Badminton. Are you able to multitask when you're playing badminton?
No,
You're completely in the zone, you're completely in the moment, you're focused on just one thing,
yeah.
right?
In fact, there are times when I realize that in this game I'll only focus on the grip, or I'll only focus on the stance. But it's difficult. In fact, that's a very interesting point, because there are times like I don't want. It's not the badminton game which I'm important. It's important to me. I really want to dedicate the game only for the grip.
Yeah.
But then it wanders, like the the pressure of the point takes it away.
Yeah.
Play the shot and realize it. I got the wrong grip.
Which is why you see, right, when Jeffrey he trains you, you see that during training you're focused on just one thing.
Yeah,
Not during playing, but during training you're focused on just one thing.
that's a very good point, because that kind of tells the importance of training, because I know what I was before and after the sessions.
That tells, for me, that tells about how you train, where
Mm.
you focus only on one thing during training at one point of time.
Yeah.
He's picked just one thing, and only when you focus on one thing and you do it over and over and over and over again, can you improve it. Can you see the mistakes in it? Can you see the flaws in it? Can you see what you could do different, what you could do better?
Mm. That's true.
And a coach can also see whether what you're doing is a luck or a consistent effort. Is it something that is second nature to you, so he makes you do it 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, right? In the process he see whether it is something that is your normal reflex, or it is something that, oh, you just got lucky to do it in that proper swing
Mm.
just by accident. And that is the one thing applying over there. Now the question is, how do you get to apply that in the areas of life that matters to you? Which areas would you want to develop yourself? What skills you want to develop? And in that, what is the one thing that you have to do? Small pieces, just like in badminton. If you had to break it down, chunk it down, and divide it, and look at it, what are the so many one different things that you want to exercise and get better at? So for example, in story writing or storytelling, the hero's journey model is one way, right? And then you look at the different elements and you ask, how can I create this kind of a character very well? How can I do character building very nicely? And then you focus on doing exercises where you write just for character building exercises. You do like 10 essays, 20 essays, 30 essays. And then you get to a point where it comes naturally to you and you understand it very well. And then you look at if there is a challenge that he has to face, and then the villain has to come in. So how does that person come in, and how does this come in? Each element you're able to break it on. That's what I'm trying to say. And when you're able to break each one down, and then you have to ask yourself, what's the one thing I want to focus on?
Mm. In fact, I'm reminded of when I wander in my mind as you speak. I'm reminded of Steve Jobs. Many people used to wait for that one more thing, at the end of the session. That keeps them, at the edge of the seats. Uh, and that one more thing is the most quirky or important thing, sometimes. And that's a way of, I mean, probably he was putting all his attention into that one more thing. Rest everything happens. You know, it's a thing
Yeah,
that everyone does.
it's a great example that you said. There is a book which is called Insanely Simple. I don't know if you've read it or heard about it. uh, Insanely Simple is written by a guy who used to work with Steve Jobs in for marketing from his advertising company. And he was saying how Dell approached and said, we like the ads that you make for Apple. Can you do the same for us? And he said, it doesn't work that way. The ads are looking simple because everything at the back end, the thought process, everything is simple. Everything. And simple is not easy. Simple is very complex, actually. To get to a point where everything is a minimalist means eliminating a lot of things and bring your focus to one thing. And if you look at Steve, and if you look at how the iPhone released, it was at a point of time where every other mobile phone companies had so many devices. They never came out with one phone. Steve was the first one who came into the industry. His own team came and gave him 3 4 different phones, and he asked him, what is this? And they said, this is with these specs, this is with these specs, this is with these specs. He said, no, I just want one phone, and I want it to be the best. So he pushed his team to come up with just one phone. And he said, make that the best phone, but I just want one phone. Capacity can be different, but nothing else.
Yeah. No, I think they have drifted away from that.
Yeah.
One way.
Yeah. So now they focus because Steve's style of leadership is very different from Tim Cook's style of leadership, right? And each one brings their own flavor to a company and organization. Tim was always the guy who was behind numbers, and he's always been number driven, I believe. And growing the company from an investor perspective and all that stuff. So Steve was the risk taker. He was the one who thought out of the box. He was a born marketer. He was great at marketing. He knew exactly things that would really make sense. That was his gift.
So the
Yeah.
one thing to take away.
The one thing to take away is, for me, to keep doing, for example, these kind of conversations on a regular basis really expands on my way of being, because it helps me pick the things that are relevant for the day. It's not something that I thought about last week or 2 weeks ago or something else. We are able to look at ideas and bring back, or not bring to the surface, I would say. There are so many ideas and thoughts that are there at the subconscious level,
Yeah.
and having these conversations always reiterates so many different things for me on a daily basis, uh, that I believe it's adding value. So
That's a very interesting thing because the freshness comes from bringing up newer ideas, because there are people who have like a toolkit of maybe 10 thoughts or games or ideas or things like that, and time and again you go to they go to different places. It's the same thing that they use.
hmm,
But when we explore like this, right, into our own selves or into each other's thoughts, and that brings an element of freshness, which kind of adds flavor to our conversations and our day-to-day life.
yeah. And I like the idea how you are exploring also something that you are not always very comfortable with. Uh, but that's probably a conversation for another day.
Sure, then, yeah.
Yeah. So what's your takeaway? What's your one thing that you're taking away from today? And this is, by the way, one thing that I always ask after every coaching session. What is the one thing that you're taking away from this conversation? So what's it for you?
It is, I would say, it's a refresher and a reminder to focus on one thing. I've
Mhm.
been trying to do that without putting words and concepts to it.
Hmm.
But now it's just a kind of reaffirmation that yeah, do it, because as I said earlier, not necessarily concurrent multitasking, but multitasking within a given period of time is something that I've been struggling with. So now
Hmm.
there is another reason to say that now don't do it.
Hmm. Yeah. And if you have 1 hour and you have to do 8 things, put 8 blocks of time.
No, that's a problem. That's a
Every
problem.
problem has a solution.
So keep 7 things away, then you get one thing.
Yeah. Saying no is also an art.
Yeah.
Saying no is how you bring. So you look at me, how I've said no to so many things in my life because I focus on one thing. I realize it doesn't matter if the other things are not there. It doesn't matter if I don't have so many other things, as long as I have the one thing. And the one thing that I want in my life is freedom. The one thing I want in my life is being able to do what I want to do and choosing
So
every moment.
that's a very interesting thing because yeah, here is a very interesting thought. Usually what we do is we have when you have like so many things, people say prioritize. You know, create a rank. We like got 10 things to do, say 1 to 10. I think we should not do that, because when you do that, that itself is such a toll on your self. Oh, why am I putting it away and things like that. So I believe we should do only priority one. You know,
Yeah.
pick up the one which is the one, and the priority need not be based on somebody's urgency, but also it could be based on the external environments, the situation that we are in, and what we can do and things like that. So just pick that one thing.
I was having a conversation yesterday with a lady, and I was talking to her at Turning Point and asking her a few questions. In that, one question struck her so hard. she was going through some challenges with her family and all that stuff, with her siblings and business that she was doing with her siblings. I asked her one question which hit her hard, which was, how would you live your life if you knew you had only 1 month more? And suddenly she crafted her one thing, even without realizing it. She said, I would speak more to my kids, I would spend more time with my family, I would not prioritize business so much, I would look at how I make food for them, how I spend time with them, how I speak to them. My son is in Canada, I would ask him to come and visit me. And she's like, I said, what if you had only 1 week more? And then that again shook her. And she's like, I really have to prioritize my family now. So, yeah, I think we will focus on the one thing when death is in front of us. When it mean, as a metaphor, if you were to look at it, when you have no other option, when time is limited and you have only one thing to do, and you have to pick something or you have to do something, then in the eventuality of that, how would you live life? How would you do things? Right?
Yep.
All right. Another day, another conversation.
Sure then. See you then.